one is that we are in a time of exceptional innovation. We're at a time when teachers, when publishers, when even learners are looking for new ways to teach and to learn English as a second language. It's enormously challenging. It's not just COVID. It's not just not being there away from your classroom. It's really a lot more than that. And it's trying to find out new ways of thinking about all of it. So I thought about this and I thought there's three things. So first of all, the first one is, yes, we're in a time of enormous innovation. Things are really, really changing. The second one is that we're also at a rate of high adoption. So what does this mean, adoption? Well, we always have new ideas. We always have new innovations, but sometimes it takes a while to accept them. And for those of you who have worked, a lifetime in schools and universities like I have, you know exactly what I mean. Those endless meetings where we decide and propose and look for grant money and try to think about something and look for alternatives, and somebody doesn't like it and nothing happens. That's gone. Right now, so many new ideas are being taken and they're being adopted really, really quickly because we need solutions. There's an urgency to all of it. So that's the second point. And the third point that is interesting, I think, for all of us is that many of these things are here to stay. It's not like this classroom that you see, this little bare classroom outside an elementary school near me in Montreal is going to go away. I think after the COVID-19, after we all have our vaccinations, it's still going to be there. People are still going to be wanting to use it. It's the same with online learning. A lot of teachers and a lot of students are finding, hey, there's, of course, I would love to be back in a classroom in some ways, but there are enormous advantages to being able to study online. So they're thinking about these ideas and trying to figure out, what is the best of online learning, and maybe how can I match that and marry that with the best of classroom teaching? Maybe there's a medium or intermediary solution to all of this that can take the advantage or the best points of each. At the same time, there's kind of a fourth thing that we need to consider. Some of these innovations are not perfect. And when I look at this, outdoor classroom, I think, oh, it's so lovely, it's so charming. The students sitting outside and they must just love, grabbing their favorite tree trunks to sort of sit at. But at the same time, where's the social distancing? You would sort of expect they should all be 6 feet apart or 2 meters apart, right? And they're not. So this is another thing to keep in mind. There is a lot of innovation. There is a lot of adoption. A lot of it will stay for a long time, but not all of it is perfect. So we need to consider, is it the best? We can't stop being critical about the innovations in education. We have to make sure that they really suit us. So with that in mind, I want to talk about teaching online. And to do this, I want to use a specific example of a textbook series. Now, some of you, maybe you're natural teachers, maybe you're very conversational. You can teach English without a textbook or something. That's fine. There's very few of us who can do that. Most of us need some kind of a textbook. And I realize not everybody here today is teaching adults even. You're teaching kindergarten or primary school, elementary school, high school. Maybe you're teaching older adults. In any case, I would say in every case, you need some kind of a textbook. Why? What's so important about having a textbook? Why not just take a bit of this or a bit of that, find some YouTube videos, whatever? It has to do with a scope and a sequence. Scope and sequence. Scope and sequence refers to the idea of everything that should be covered in a language program. That's the scope. And the sequence of when it should be taught and when it should be retaught. So you don't just teach something once, you teach it again and again. So because students not only learn, they also forget. And so we have to continuously reinforce the ideas that we're putting out to them. So I'm going to use some examples from Startup today in the lesson to give structure to this talk. But whatever textbook you're using, you should be following some of the same steps and taking advantage of many of the great resources that are out there for you to use. So let's have a look at those some of those ideas. So what's our scenario? What's our situation? What's our starting point today? Well, schools closed, but classes must go on. So the school buildings are closed, but of course we realize that classes need to continue. So for most of us, we are doing this in teams, not having to do it just by ourselves. But we have to imagine if we're a teacher who needs to find a way for classes, for students to continue, what exactly are we going to do? What are we going to do to try to help classes continue in some way? That's essentially really the question that I want to ask today and what I'm going to try to answer over the next 30 minutes or so. All right, so a lot of textbooks now, fortunately, Startup is one example, and you find this across all of Pearson's, almost all of Pearson's offerings. There are many digital versions of the student books. Why do they need a digital version? Don't they have a paper version? Sometimes they do, but I know that in some countries it's been difficult getting the books to the students. So sometimes this can be an option that you can work out with your publisher. And again, at any age, at any level. So some sort of digital version of it. Often these digital versions are great because you can see everything, you can blow it up on your screen, you can focus, use a little magnifying glass for more details. But in other cases, they are not interactive. We're actually building at Pearson now interactive versions of many of these books so students can fill in the answers and go through a unit like that. But that's still coming in some cases. In some cases, it's already here. It's a good thing. A big part of having the textbook as well is that students register and then they get bonus features, right? Bonus features. And when they get bonus, it's like so many apps. You get an app and then sign up for bonus features, right? And this is exactly what goes on here. So they use the information and access code, and that gives them additional access to the digital features that they find on Startup or other products that they're using. More importantly, for you as a teacher, there are endless resources available for you. So these include things like teacher training videos that go through all aspects of how to teach a lesson using this particular book. There's all the audio files and video files if you want to use them separately. There's all sorts of what we call reproducibles. It simply means they're PDFs of exercises that you can email to students. So that's a great thing because you can just send them straight to students. Of course, there's the teacher's book, a teacher's edition, and many other resources. We'll go through some of these as we continue. So partly getting a textbook I always say it's like an iceberg. You see the top 10% of the iceberg in the print book, but the 90% of it is all the underlying assets and all the underlying resources that are available to you once you engage a bit more. Okay, so if, say, we want to go into those videos, what are we going to find? So the teacher videos, they have things like the startup, what are the components for the students? It explains everything the students are going to get. There's a course introduction, the why are you doing it, who, what, when, where, why questions. It answers all of those. And then there's a teacher support overview. What can you do for me? And it will explain all the different components where you can get some extra help. And then things like a unit walkthrough. So it says, let's look at one unit and go step by step how you would teach this particular unit. So it gives you lots of ideas for things like that. And you can see there's other categories with many other videos. There's more than 20 videos here altogether on things like planning and teacher support, assessment, student components, and how to. So how to do all sorts of different things such as flipped learning, which we'll talk about later. So there's a lot of resources. So again, I'm using this example of Startup, but again, a lot of you may have been using a textbook and you've never really spent the time to look online and say, well, are there some resources for my textbook online? And maybe there is. So have a look, because I talk to teachers all the time when I travel, when I used to travel, and they often say, oh, I didn't know that was there. So take advantage of it, of what you're already paying for. So whether you look at something like the student components, you've got a little video that explains all the parts of that. And not every school will buy every component, but like the workbook, maybe not. In my English lab, maybe not, although there's very good reasons for doing that. But the student book, the online content, and an app. So that's kind of a very valuable and exciting thing, is to get into the app as well. The Pearson Practice App is available for many of the products now, and I know other publishers are bringing out apps as well. I just want to explore, like, why is an app important? They've got the student book. Why do they also have an app? Is this just a waste of time, something extra that's unnecessary? Well, first of all, it comes with every book, so you're not paying anything extra. It just comes with every book. And that's true for all the Pearson products that have the Pearson English apps. But they set it up. They set it up on their phones, and they set it up, and they use it in a different way, in a kind of a post-textbook way. Something's quite modern. What they're doing is they're using micro amounts of time to consult it. They're not going to sit down for an hour like they're doing homework and go through everything on the app. They're going to do 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. They're going to get a few ideas and think about it a bit. And while they're waiting at the bus, while they're on the subway, when they're standing in line at a bank, or they've got 5 minutes before dinner, they're just going to look at it then. They can look at all of the videos, they can do exercise, they can listen to all the audios. Everything is there from it. And most importantly, they just download it. They download it once and it's on the phone. So they can go to, I don't know, a Starbucks or a coffee shop, get the free Wi-Fi, and then it's on their phones. So they don't have to use their data doing it all the time. So you can see things like the types of activities. Look at the photos, then tap the correct weather words. So they're not terribly difficult, but again, it gives a student a sense of, are they on top of what they're doing? More importantly, it's a big thing for me, especially with adults, but all students of every age. It helps to build responsibility. It's the student's responsibility to improve themselves. And this is something is more necessary now than ever. If students are all sitting in front of you in a class 5 hours a week, you've got your eyes on them, you're looking at them, you can keep them on track. But, they're taking classes a couple of hours a week online. You don't see them. You're not sure how much they're paying attention. They don't feel as compelled to be prepared, maybe. So they need to take more responsibility. So the app kind of helps them to do that. You push it on to them. Other types of activities are like this. Read each sentence, then tap the correct answer. And then there's video, as I say. So they look at the video. Again, the video is the same as is in the textbook, but with new questions. So they watch the video, then they have to answer some questions. It's cut into little pieces so that they can manage that. The point is not to do it once. The point is not to do it once. The point is to do it 100 times, and for students to keep doing it. It's like a computer game practically, where they see their score after trying a few things. So it's kind of an enjoyable and engaging thing for them to do, and most importantly, it helps with their English development. A big thing that all of us need is some kind of a platform, Today we're using Click Meeting here. You might be using Click Meeting. Many of you will use Zoom. There's the Microsoft Teams. There's the Google Meet. There's a lot of different ones you can use, and it's quite often up to your institution. They might have a particular choice or a preference. Maybe they have something already installed. You've been using it for a while. I think that's great. If you're really comfortable with something, that's fairly good. But something that we decided to do with Startup and with many other products across the whole Pearson platform is to say, okay, we're going to integrate Zoom. And by integrating Zoom, we do some really wonderful things. It means that you can go directly from your teacher portal, and you can organize all of your students, you can organize your classes, you can decide what you're sharing, and you can set up all of those classes. Once you start a lesson or decide you're going to have a lesson, then you can schedule classes and set them onto a calendar. So you've got a clear idea, and you can see the buttons are like Zoom lessons. You can, if you still have regular face-to-face meetings with with your students. You can set up regular classroom lessons, and you can also set up when you're going to have your tests, and you can share these with the students. So you have a good idea. You have a good idea, they have a good idea, but it's all within the platform. So you're not having to worry about, okay, how do I sign on to this? How do I use this? It makes it easier for you just using Zoom. But again, if you have some other platform that you're using that works quite well for you, that's great. I'm just going to use some examples from Zoom today, and there's some things that other platforms might do better, but this is just some examples from that. So one thing that I love about Zoom is that everyone is in the front row, and this is true for many of the platforms. I love this feature. A great one about Zoom, though, is you can mute everyone's microphone. You can turn off everybody's microphone. I know that in some platforms, I think Google, maybe you can't turn off everybody's microphone. They have to do it themselves. So if somebody is, their dog is barking in the background and they're not paying attention, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's one great thing. But for all of these platforms, what I really love about them, and again, this is one of those innovative things that maybe is a little bit better than face-to-face classes, is you see the students. They're right there in front of you. It's like every student is sitting in the front row of the classroom. So this is such a great thing because you do have a bit more intimacy with your students. And I found that talking with many teachers, and in my own case, I teach graduate students and doctoral students, and I teach online as well. And I find it very intimate because I do get to know them quite well. You also see parts of their homes and everything else. You look in the background, and that's all kind of nice as well. So you just get a little bit more familiar with them. So there are advantages. There are definite advantages there. Another thing that I would suggest, this is a big tip for all of you, is to help students to keep in touch, but privately. And this is an idea that has a couple of perspectives. I suggest that you get every student you have for each class, or maybe for just the classes at your particular school, to create a unique address or email address using something like Gmail. There's other ones they could use, but something like Gmail. What do they need a new one? I already have one. Why do they need a new one? They'll ask that. There's a couple of things. First of all, it's to preserve their privacy. It means that, if there's other students, bothering them or something like that, it's not that they have permanent access to their personal email. You might not want that. You might not want, someone else in the class, it's kind of creepy if they have your email all the time. But this one you have just for the duration of the class. It's monitored. As a teacher, you can go back and forth, say this person's bothering me or something like that. So it's kind of a privacy issue. But there's another reason. There's another reason that's very, very strong here. And it's because it's that once the students have an email that's dedicated just to your class, then if they're looking at their email during class, they're not getting all these other messages from their aunts and uncles and friends and girlfriends and everything else. It's just, it's really just simply, they're much more focused on it. So that's the thing. And then they say, well, but why? Why do they need emails at all? I'm doing the teaching. What are they supposed to, they're just, why do they need emails? It's a big thing. You want students to collaborate. You want them to be working together a lot more than ever, actually much more, because in a traditional classroom, you have lots of opportunities for students, after a break or, just out in the hallway or on the school grounds, sitting out where they're having their lunch, to meet and to engage and to work together on things. But once you finish a digital class, you turn this off, everyone's gone to the wind. Everyone's gone to the wind, and they're no longer in contact. So by creating this type of an email, you put them into contact. It's a great thing. So everybody feels much more connected. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a platform. Students have emails, and we need something as a kind of a presentation tool. So you don't have to do this. You could, of course, do what I'm doing right now. You could create a PowerPoint for yourself. You could, just talk for the whole time. You could have it without a PowerPoint and just speak all the time. Some teachers do that, but what Active Teach does is it's a front of class presentation tool. So the front of class presentation tool means you can use, you can put up the screens that the students are seeing, the pages of the book, and then you can manipulate them. You can use the pen and underline things, or circle things, or you can use a highlighter. You can magnify glass, and you can make some parts bigger to focus on them. And you can do a lot else, a lot of other things with it as well. If you're trying to learn about this and you think, oh, it sounds complicated, don't worry, it's all explained. Again, you go back to the teacher portal and there's very clear explanations on how it's all used. So you can just watch the videos and they will explain. So for example, this is the small screen set in here. You can see the pink arrow. It's pointing to vocabulary flashcards. So they've got vocabulary flashcards. So you can bring those up and show the students. Remember I was saying there's more interactive features here. Or you go to extra exercises. You see the little star icons, and when you click onto those star icons, then it takes you to extra exercises which you can do online. You can say, Jose, what's the answer to number 3? And you can do that back and forth in class. So it feels much more interactive. And then on the screen on the right, you can see, oh, there's more. You can play all the audios and all the videos from the course. So everything that's built into it. So you can just play it on your speakers automatically and play it again and again if students need that. Play it and stop it partway and say, let's talk about that first, and then go on to the next section. There's also lots of video help and specific videos built in. These include, in the lower levels, especially in startup, things like grammar and pronunciation coach videos. This is where a master teacher comes on and kind of explains how to do grammar, how to do pronunciation in inductive ways that are quite often easier for students to understand. Again, it's all on Active Teach. It's easy to see these things. The students can also go to their portals or to their app on their phone, and they can check it out after as well. So they can watch it again and again. Again, push that responsibility on. And you can see other things for conversations. They pop up into videos. So again, you can show the videos. But an interesting thing here is it says for the conversation, if you can read the fine print, it says listen or watch. Why both? Why do we have both? They have a listening file, just audio, and they have a video. Why would you have both? Well, there's a really good reason. There's a really good reason. First of all, it's bandwidth. It's sometimes in some places the students can't get the video, or it slows down because their internet connection is quite poor. So in that case, you might say, okay, listen, I'm just going to play the audio. But why do we need the video? Why is the video a good thing? They can look at it on their phones afterwards or on the portal. It's important because in the conversations, they're learning body language. They're learning facial expressions. They're even learning how the lips are used when we're pronouncing individual words. So all of these things come out. So it's a good opportunity for students. Okay, so you're ready for the first class. You've got your platform. You're working with Zoom or some other thing. You've got your textbook. The students have registered for the app, for their own portal. You've reviewed everything. You're ready to start a class. What are you going to do? Well, first of all, before the class, you want to ensure that the students understand how everything works. Again, this is not unique to startup. It's in many, many different textbooks, but they have some kind of a welcome unit that tells students how to work through these things. This is something you probably get students to do beforehand. They practice on this, they get familiar with it, and then they say, okay, I understand how the app works. I understand how, doing a unit works. It's just a few exercises for them and some videos to watch. So it helps them. It helps prepare them. And then before yourself, you also want to get prepared. And fortunately, there's an excellent teacher's edition. Now, again, I just shake my head. I go I've been to 43 countries. I travel. Last year I went to 12 countries, 20 cities. I took 60 flights. I gave 60 presentations. I took 50 flights. And everywhere I go, one of the questions I say is, do you use how many people use the teacher book, right? And half the people don't. I think, why not? It's like buying a car and then pushing it down the road. Say, why don't you drive it? Say, oh, it's just too much trouble. I don't want to learn how to drive drive it. I'm just going to push it, right? It's crazy. Use your teacher's book. They're packed. And for almost any series, they're packed with great ideas about how you can teach, and especially startup. It's got lots of great ideas and alternatives. Another way to teach, or working with more able students or less able students. What are some techniques or tricks you can do? You've got students who are ahead. What can you give them that's extra for more motivated students? So there's many options there. So you start the unit, and that teacher's notes there is going to ask you to do certain things. And it's going to say, look at the learning goals, look at the title of the unit, look at the photo and discuss that with the students. What's going on, to get them interested and excited and engaged about what they're going to be learning. And then an unusual part of startup that we have are these little text messages that go through every lesson, or most lessons. And the text messages, what they're really doing is just trying to spark some interest among the students. And it's the way in which students do this. Yeah. Okay. And then you have a choice. You have a choice of interacting with students. And there's kind of three choices. And the important thing is to juggle these around in different ways. So one way to act is, of course, the whole class. That's what I'm doing now, right? I'm doing that right now because we've got 500. I think we have 500 participants in the room right now. Can't talk to everybody. But with Zoom, something we can do is we can use breakout rooms, and we can put everyone into smaller rooms, so I can divide the class into two, or put them in groups of 3 or 4, whatever I want to do. Another way to contact students is through Zoom chat. You can do this for the whole class, or you can just talk to one student and say, "Oh, I notice you're not answering the questions," or something, or the opposite, praise. You can say, "That was such a great answer. Thanks for sharing." Again, to build up the students, all the things that you would do in a traditional classroom, but sometimes a bit difficult. Okay. So when you break students into breakout rooms, a good thing is that with Zoom, you can go and visit each room. So say I've got a class of 30 students. I have groups of 5, 6 groups of 5. And then I go and visit each one. They're practicing their conversations continuously. And then I just pop in, I listen, I say, "Oh, work on this a bit more. You're doing a good job." And then I go to the next room. When I'm finished visiting all the rooms, then I bring the students back together. So it's a great technique. It's a great technique for feeling, and it's so similar to what you would do in a traditional classroom. So it gives that variety, authenticity. Then you're into the units. And again, you've got a lot of choices of what you can do. It starts off with vocabulary. Students have to listen. You're playing the audio for that. They're listening. Then they have to listen, repeat. So you can just give them a minute to do that. Then there's other activities where they have to do an exercise, or they have to do some pair exercise work. So each of these, you work all your way through this. They do some grammar, going here into conversation skills, and we see that little orange box. We'll come back to that in a second. But say they're doing the grammar. A lot of students have difficulty with grammar, and they need some extra help. And you don't always want to stop the whole class to give one student some extra help. But what you can do is, again, I mentioned at the beginning on the portal, there's this wonderful reproducibles. These are these PDFs that you can just email off to a student who needs it. So again, there's ones for every single lesson, and you can just say, "Okay, you need some extra help, I'll send this." But even within the book, at the back of the book, in the back matter, there's also exercises, some that they listen to and for grammar, and other ones that they just do. So again, there's lots of opportunities for them to practice. I mentioned this orange boxes. Actually, they come in different colors, but they're all skills boxes. They're all boxes that basically give students extra help, a little bit of extra ideas. So what are those skills? Because what we have to do is really give students skills that they will use in the long term. Vocabulary tends to be quite short term. They learn the words, they remember them. If they use them, they'll really remember them. If they don't use them so much, they might forget them after a while. That's okay. It's true for all of us. But in other cases, You say, there's things like reply questions, linking vowels. Here we have listen for questions, find the main idea, tips for revising. These all sorts of things come up continuously. And here's a tip. Quite often we cover these in a unit and then we forget about them. We go on to the next lesson, the next unit. Don't do that. Get students to go back to them. Keep referring back to them. Say, okay, remember 3 weeks ago we talked about reply questions. Who can tell me about that again? And then they have to think about it. So again, students not only learn, they also forget. So we have to have some systems of getting them to revise these things over time. We continue moving through the book. It has a reading lesson, and then there's a writing lesson. At the first level, these are single pages each, and then they go on to double pages as they become more complex at the higher levels. And so it's a great opportunity for them to sort of explore things. When you're presenting it, you can have them listening as they read, and then they can go do that themselves as well. So there's lots of chances for them to go through the materials. One of the biggest things, and again, this goes back to the Gmail that we talked about earlier, is make use of the students' emails to ask them to share and critique each other's assignments. There's too often all we do is we have the students work by themselves, or even they work in a group, and then they send it to you. It's a waste of your time, because the students get a mark back. They say, A, okay, fine, and throw it over their shoulder. Or they say, fail, too bad, throw it over their shoulder. But when you put them in groups, when you put them in pairs, and when you ask them to critique each other's work, to give feedback to each other, they really help each other, because they can explain things in terms that they understand. So it's an important one. So don't forget this opportunities of using the email. At the end of the unit, there's an assessment tool. It's not a review. It is a review, but it works in a different way. It's a kind of an assessment where you ask students to do some kind of a presentation product. Now, this is in our age. This is a 21st century type of a task, because students are expected to use their phones and video. Take a video or a set of pictures to share their answers. That's what students do now. The video is a tool. It lets them practice their reading and writing as they create a script for it, and then they have to say it, so they're doing speaking and listening. It integrates the vocabulary, the content, the grammar of the unit into the task. So again, at the end of it, they show you that, again, you want to have them peer review it, critique it for each other, share it, everything else. So it's a great opportunity to do that. Just briefly, you've got formative assessment throughout the unit. Formative is, again, just giving students feedback so they can improve. Summative assessment is so you can make a decision. Now, my English lab doesn't come with all the time. You have to have that as part of your package, but when you do, it has a lot of tasks that you can just assign, and then they're automatically marked. And this is fantastic. So they go straight into your grade book. The students do that. You can give a timing for when they can take the test. You can say, yes, it has to be done between this hour and this hour on this day, and they do it, and then it's sent and submitted. It's marked, and then you have it all. There's other types of tasks as well, such as this one, which is to listen and repeat. And in this one, they listen to a piece of speech, and then they have to repeat it, and then they can listen to what they just did, and they can do it and do it and do it again until they get it perfect. So great opportunity. We continue at Pearson to develop new things, and one of the great things they're doing is they're creating a new test generator. We already have ExamView, and with all the units, there's a couple of two quizzes for every unit, and then there's a midterm quiz, two midterm quizzes, two final quizzes. So there's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of stuff there to work with. Okay, and then but sometimes you don't have time. Sometimes it's too much, and this is where you should really be looking at flipped learning. If the schedule feels rushed, you have to think of maybe getting the students to do more work at home, so that your class time is used for checking out, do the students understand? Let them demonstrate what they've learned. Let them show you and let them show each other, what they can do in terms of speaking and listening, and put more of the reading and writing especially outside. Now, again, there's lots of help of doing this. There's a couple of videos on the teacher portal that give you clear instructions, and most importantly about flipped learning. It shifts responsibility to learning to the student. If you're teaching adults, it's great, but really kids of any age, people of any age, you should really just be shifting the responsibility so that it's not like, you ask students, why are you learning English? Because we have to. It's a terrible answer. You have to motivate them, of course, but really they have to take responsibility for learning. There's lots of other videos about how to teach with Startup already online. You can go to english.com, just search Startup, or many other products, many other Pearson products. And there are videos about how to step-by-step go through a lesson for teaching. So a lot of resources there for you. So we come up to this sort of big question that a lot of people are asking these days. They're saying online, face-to-face, which is better, and some people are starting to think there's a lot of good things about online. There's a lot we can do. It fits into students' schedules. They don't have to travel to the school. They can be in the comfort of their homes. It's not everything. Face-to-face has all advantages as well. I think after the pandemic, after COVID-19, we're going to have more combinations of the two. That's what we're going to be seeing. Okay, so what do we know? What do we know? There was so much information in such a short time, I know. Well, Startup makes it very, very easy for you to teach online. A lot of textbooks do. A lot of textbooks has resources, and it's your duty basically to look and see what's already there. Are there digital components online? Look for it. Also ask your representative and say, hey, what do you have for me? I'm teaching online. How can you help me? And there might be some surprising resources that are already there for you to use. So take advantage of those things. Integrated Zoom helps you engage students. Again, you might use other platforms other than Zoom. Zoom has some really good features. I particularly like them, but again, whatever works for you is fine. Just make sure that it does what you're able to do online for what you would like to do in the classroom. That's one of your measures of things. There's many videos and print resources to help you and your students. Now, again, the Pearson site is full of these sorts of things. This video will be available afterwards if there's any tips you missed. There's a lot available out there helping you to try to teach things. Look for things specific to the book that you're teaching. Type in, videos or how to teach or something like that. Go to YouTube, you'll probably find lots of resources there. The print resources as well, the teacher's book, don't overlook it. Don't overlook it. It's a gold mine of great ideas for you. And it makes your teaching easier to do that. So there's many ways for you to assess formatively and summatively. So formatively, again, just give tests. You don't have to mark them, but give students feedback about how well they're doing. Summatively is for making decisions. Have they graduated? Then can they go to the next level? And help is always available. There's lots of people like myself. There's lots of people at Pearson. If you have some specific questions for me, we're going to answer a few questions now. I think Charlie's going to share with us. But if you don't get a chance to ask your question, you can always send me a quick email. So now we're going to have a few questions. There's my email right there. And thanks so much for everybody for being here. Right? Okay. Charlie.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ken. That was inspiring. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, yeah.
Fantastic, good to hear. Okay, great. So we have had a couple of questions through. Quite a few people have actually been asking, before we come to the questions, people have been asking around the GSE and the skills boxes with it. So I'm just going to share a URL to the GSE Teacher Toolkit. So please check this out. And this is where you can find a huge amount of resources to do with the global scale of English and, importantly, the teacher.
Yeah.
We've also had people, Ken, we've also had people asking about assessment and some of the options that Pearson offers. So here's a URL. Here's a URL to the assessment catalog. And finally, people have been asking what products can they get access to the portal. So please explore this URL, which is the ELT catalog. And here you can find out all about the products, which ones are linked to the portal, and these great online tools that Ken's been talking about today. Those three URLs are now pinned at the top of the chat box. So please, everyone, take a note and explore after the session. So Ken, down to the questions for you. Okay. We had one come in really early on. So keen to answer this one.
You're cutting out, Charlie, so you have to speak right into the microphone. Yeah.
Okay, let's try this. Let's hope this works then. How would you recommend teaching phrasal verbs online? The person has also added that they're looking for some creative and perhaps rather unusual methods.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Yeah, because there are lots of ideas out there for teaching phrasal verbs. There's no question. But I would really start. One of my big things is, for those of you who heard me speak before, is the whole idea of the lazy teacher. I think that most teachers work too hard when they should be, and they spend all weekends, preparing materials and getting ideas together. How am I going to teach this? When really what they should be doing is pushing it back. So with phrasal verbs, you've got, 2 or 3 questions. First of all, what is a phrasal verb? What is it? How does it differ from other verbs? And what are examples of phrasal verbs? And the third question, how do we use them? So those are really the 3 questions that you're trying to answer when you're teaching phrasal verbs. So what do I do? Well, I might explain what a phrasal verb is to begin with, but then I would send the students out. I would say, find me. Everybody has to find 10 different phrasal verbs, right? Go look wherever you want, but try to find them in the real world. So what I want you to do is I want you to take some photographs when you're out, if your students can go out these days and such, and they'll find phrasal verbs in advertising posters and on the walls and everywhere else. So they come back with photographs. This means that they're not just going to phrasalverb.com or whatever there is and just looking up a list and sending it to you. They're really becoming conscious of how they're used in the real world. And then you ask the students to explain them. So say, again, what am I doing? Nothing. I'm just pushing it back to the students. Am I being a lazy teacher? Well, yes and no. Really what I'm trying to do is build more responsibility on the part of the students. I'm trying to get them actively engaged in their own educations, and I'm localizing it as well. And I don't care where you live. I don't care where you live anywhere in the world, but you will always find English everywhere. There's always English on menus, on posters, on advertising. So students will find that sort of thing. So what's the outcome of a thing like this? A few things. First of all, students become sensitized to the fact that English is around them and that these phrasal verbs are being used in real contexts. And long after the project is finished, long after the week's lesson is done, they will continue to look at those phrasal verbs. So you've built in a kind of a reinforcement for it. Secondly, as they share it with each other, then, again, it becomes a kind of a competition for them to share things. Maybe not 10, maybe 5 or even 1 is great. The question you're asking right now is, what if they do the same ones? The students will ask that. What if we get the same ones? Say, not my problem. And just say, talk to each other. You've got each other's emails now. Share your lists. Get out there and get them quickly because somebody else will get it if you don't. So again, it just builds a community among your students. So there's a lot of different ways. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
I think it did. Thank you, Ken. So I've got 2 questions here. They're around motivation. You have spoken for Pearson on motivation in the past, but this is now a new motivation that we need to address. So Ken, how can you encourage, in online lessons, how can you encourage students to speak if they don't want to? Have you got any tips for getting the shy ones to speak? And also, how can you persuade those students who don't want to turn on their cameras to turn them on? And if they don't want to turn them on, what's a good workaround?
Okay, so a couple of related questions here. And I think what we have to do is start with why, the why question. Why don't they want to turn on their cameras? Why don't they want to speak online? Let's start with the speaking online. Often students don't want to speak online because they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel competent. I mean, if I ask any of you to speak up or something like that, or stand up and say something, you're fine because you're a teacher, you're confident, you've learned English, right? And our students are not like that. So you all remember when you were students, and I certainly do as well, teachers saying, Kenny, stand up. Tell us the question and answer the number 1. I think, you just want to die. So how do we get around that? Well, going back to the Zoom breakout rooms, this is fantastic because what you can do is, instead of just starting with a question and asking students, saying, okay, how would you ask somebody how would you ask somebody if you wanted to order a pizza or something like that? How would you order a pizza in English? You say that question, but you say, okay, before you answer that, just take time, and I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and I want you each to think of 3 ways you can do that. Talk in your breakout rooms, right? And so they talk, everything else, and then you visit each room, and you say, oh, you're doing quite well. I think that's a great answer. I'm going to call on you to speak to the rest of the class, and go around like that. And then everybody gets a little more confidence. So they practiced with each other. The peers have maybe given them some corrections. You've been in the room privately, they're not embarrassed if you're not correcting them in front of the entire class. So that's one way to sort of get around that. It's basically building up student confidence. So ask yourself the question, why don't they want to speak? And then try to answer that. The second one about not wanting to appear on video. This is an interesting one. I have it with my own students as well, who are teachers, all teachers, but I just simply insist. I said, no, I need to see your faces, sorry. Yeah, whatever. But again, I have to go back to the question, why don't they want to be on video? And here I've asked this question actually from some of my friends around the world in different countries, and I've gotten 2 answers that are interesting. The first is that it uses up a lot of bandwidth for the student to put the video up, and honestly, that's understandable. I kind of get that. So if that's the case, then maybe it's expensive for them to do it. And the other one is a little sad. Is sometimes people don't have a room in the house where they feel it's private, or where maybe they're, I don't know, a little ashamed of their house. They don't want other people to see where they live or something like that. That's the case as well, which is, it's just really sad. And I think we have to be a little sensitive to that. So what would I do? What would I do? What would I do? I think I'd probably try for something saying, okay, you have a choice. I need to see you. I need to see you speaking the language and using the language. So I understand if you have a really good reason for not wanting to be online, you can tell me. That's fine. Let's talk about it after class. But if you're not online, I also want you to do a little project for me so I can see you speaking. And I just need you to do a little video. I'm going to ask you on page 36, there's a reading. I'd like you to read that out loud for me, and just so I can get a sense, and so I can help you, with your pronunciation and things like that. So, some sort of carrot and stick. The carrot is, some motivation to do things because you're giving them opportunities to express themselves in a safe way. The stick is, well, okay, if you're not going to be online, then you have to do some extra work. And sometimes you might magically turn on the cameras after that. But yeah, you have to understand your own context and why students might not want to be online. Okay. Another question, Charlie? Yeah.
Well, we had a nice contribution from Tamar there, being that said that I always tell them that I also made mistakes when I was a student. And I guess, how do we learn? What's the best method to learning? And that's to making our mistakes. So yeah. You're right on the money then, Ken. Make them comfortable. Yeah. Okay, so the last one is also very apt to the new online world we're looking at. How do you deal with cheating? What are some tips for stopping students from cheating online?
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so it's the biggest, there's a number of answers to this question. First of all, it is difficult and students will cheat, but you also have to ask, again, I always start with the why question. Why do students cheat? They often cheat because they think whatever they're learning is not valuable. So they think it's more valuable just not to waste their time, because they don't really accept that, what they're learning is useful or valuable, and maybe they just want to get a mark out of the class. So that's really the root of the problem. Sometimes they think it's because the exercise itself is so foolish that why would they bother doing it? So they get a quiz with 30 questions that are just like ABC, and it's boring, and they think, I can't be bothered, so what's your answers? And they just copy them just to get it done. So again, if I can go back to one of the things we talked about in ours, in startup, and you can adapt this idea to anything that you're doing, which is to have some kind of an assignment where students do individual work. So if they're doing individual work, they can't cheat. And if they do a little project, it's more motivating and it's more interesting. And so they won't they won't be able to do that. So, for example, in these ones that we're using in startup, every student does something different, and you can just ask them a question with some variable in it. So, if I was teaching about the zoo or animals or something like that, I would say, okay, everybody pick a different animal. What if we pick the same one? Not my problem. Talk to each other. Everybody pick a different animal. You choose it, and then they do it. So in that way, they avoid, copying. But it's really, you have to ask yourself why and question whether or not sometimes maybe you're giving really boring assignments and that are too easy to cheat on. Whereas if you give them things that they all have to do something slightly different, still on the same theme, but they will do things a bit better, and they'll focus, and it'll be more motivating for them as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I'm going to squeeze one more out of you, Ken, because right. I know we've got time, and this is a topic that I'm pretty sure you presented with Pearson in the past. So have you got any tips for practicing flipped learning in higher education?
Great. Okay. Yeah. So I've done this a lot. I've spoken about this a lot. And I think if you looked online, you'll probably find, and on the Pearson website, you'll probably find some lectures on this that go into much greater depth. But yes, what is the basic idea of flipped learning? It's trying to get students to do more work at home so that when they come to class, they're having time to present. They're having time to speak. They're having time to, listen to each other, get into conversations, and to show what they know. But also time for them to ask questions. You say, okay, you did the reading. Are there any questions? Of course, they'll all say, no questions. Students are like that. But if you say, okay, if you did the reading, who was, what was the main idea? Or what was, how did he support? What was the 3 points of evidence? Start asking them questions like that. That's better. But they're doing the work outside of class. The way it works is that you have to convince students that it's a good idea. It's unusual and it's different from what they're used to, but you sort of say, let's try it. Let's make it an experiment. And you can't be too hard on yourself. You can't say, oh, I tried it once, it didn't work, so I'm never going to do it again. You try it a few times. You get a culture of it going so the students become more used to it. You create more interesting projects that students are doing outside of class, like the ones that I've mentioned already, like the phrasal verbs one, go and find your phrasal verbs. And then when they come to class, they're sharing interesting information. The other thing is, as part of this, it's kind of related, is to turn the students into teachers. So if I have a book with grammar in every lesson, I'm not going to teach that myself. I would just assign it 30 grammar lessons and 30 students. Everybody get a grammar lesson. You could do it with a partner if you want. You could do 2 with a partner if you want, up to you. But you have to present the grammar to the class. That way, at least one student learns something really in depth. And other students, when they have questions about it, they come back and they're not going to ask the teacher because that's embarrassing. But they'll ask the other students, say, I didn't get that phrasal verb thing. Like, how exactly does that work? Oh, it's easy, because they've studied it more in depth. So there's a number of different things you can do, but it's really about getting students doing more work outside of class so that when they come to class, they're sharing rather than just sitting there listening. And again, it's more fun for everybody. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ken. I know that you've got so much more to say about flipped learning, and I've actually dug out this old URL for an old webinar, which you delivered in 2019. So, guys, please check out. There's another hour of Ken talking about flipped learning there for you. So, Ken, unfortunately, that is all we've got time for. Great. So, thank you so much for the time putting this together and delivering this session. And thank you to all of you attendees for taking the time out of your day. Thank you for your engagement and for your comments and your questions. It's inspiring as always. Certificates will be sent out. Recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And please look out for the link to the goodie bag, which will follow you after this session. So once again, thank you all and have a good rest of your day or your evening. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.